All right, let me make this full screen. Okay, so again, today we're talking about time management and study skills. And again, my name is Isabella. So let's go ahead and get started. So number one, the most obvious one, why is this important? So managing your time and having good study skills is so important for all aspects of your life. It's important, obviously, for your grades, but it's also important because what you do in school is going to pave the way for you to get a good career, to have good skills when you do have a career. So it's important for multiple reasons. And more importantly, time management helps you maintain balance. A lot of people, including me when I was in college, would just pull like endless all-nighters when I had a test. I didn't do any of my reading until the night before my final, and I was so stressed out. Every single finals season, I would get sick. I would just feel miserable. I was not happy. And I really kind of regret not teaching myself good time management skills. I think that if I could go back to college now, I would be so much more organized and like way less of a procrastinator, because when you get to the workforce, you just can't operate like that. You can't pull an all-nighter before your work project is due. You have to actually split it up into little chunks and work on it over time. So I think learning those skills in college or in high school really help you prepare for when you're in the workforce. And then obviously, this is important for your sanity, for your self-care, for your mental health, your physical health as well. If you're always stressing yourself out, you can get physically ill. So we really want to avoid that. All right, so we know why it's important. So let's actually get into some tips. So I think time management is something that I think is really hard to be taught. I think we can suggest ways for you to do it. We can show you resources. But at the end of the day, time management is up to you to kind of decide and hone and figure out what works for you. So I'm going to share a few ideas today, but I think at the end of the day, it's up to you to actually make that change and implement this into your life. So one suggestion that you can do is use a planner or a calendar. For me, now working, I have to use a Google Calendar because we have to share our calendars with everyone on our team. Everything is changing so quickly that it's kind of a pain to actually erase it from my physical planner. But when I was in school, I was all about having my physical agenda or planner, whatever you want to call it. And I would actually like write down the homework I had. I would write down when tests were, when exams were. And that was really helpful for me. So I think you have to figure out what works for you. In college, I had one of those big, huge calendars that I would put on my desk, and I would write out my final schedule, my midterms, and then also my fun stuff. So like if I knew it was my friend's birthday, I would put that on my calendar, or when I was going home for winter break, I put that on my calendar too. Other things, you should make sure you're writing down everything. So you can write down your homework, tests, quizzes, but also, again, like your fun stuff, but also if you're part of clubs or if you have work, that should all be on your calendar. I think everything should be on your calendar. I like to, now as like an adult, I write down reminders in the beginning of the year, like every month, at the last day of the month, I write pay rent for every month. Just go ahead and do that for the 12 months. I write down everyone's birthdays. I write down things like check your credit score on this day, or make sure you make a dentist appointment for the next month. So that way, when it's actually that month and everything's going on, you don't have to stress about it because you already took the time to plan ahead. So I think that's really important. If you're doing a daily calendar, like, Monday, and you have your 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. schedule and you have everything hour by hour, I really like doing that. I think it's a little bit unsustainable, at least for me, because some days I don't even want to look on my computer or my phone, so that doesn't really work for me. But I've seen really successful calendars where people do that, and they really like calendar every 30 minutes. So they're like, wake up, go to breakfast, walk to class, go to class. And they really, really narrow it all down. I think that's great because then you can schedule in study time and break time. So it's really all about finding what works for you. Another thing you can do is color code. I'm not really a fan of color coding because I think it's kind of a hassle to switch colors all the time, but it definitely works for people. So if it works for you, go for it. I would suggest using different colors for different classes. So math class is one color, English class is another color, Spanish class is another color, and do that. Or you can have different types of colors for different tasks. So all of your tests are red, all of your practice is green, whatever works for you. Try to limit your colors. Like I'm looking at this picture right here. This person has like 10 different colors. That's a little overwhelming. And then you always have to have all those different pens. It's like, I kind of think it's too much trouble. But it does work well for Google Calendar because then you can easily just switch. Another idea, or not an idea, this is you got to do this. Stick to the schedule. So if you're putting all of this effort into your calendar, there's no point in doing it if you're not going to actually use it. So make sure you're actually using it and make sure you're actually following that study time and that break time. I'm really guilty of saying, like, I'm going to stop working at 5 today so that I can spend time with my friends and my family. But then I'm like, oh, but if I just spend like 20 more minutes, I'll finish this project. And then I do that, and then I get an email, and by the time I know it, it's like 7:30, and I never really got to wrap up. So you want to make sure you're really sticking to your schedule so that you can have a healthy work, school, life balance. And then one thing that's helpful too is sync your calendar to your phone. You can do that with Google Calendar, but you can also do that if you're on a Mac, which I think most of you SRA students are. There's that calendar, I think it's called iCal. You can sync it to your phone so that it's kind of everywhere. You can set reminders. That's pretty helpful too. All right, so now we're going to talk about study skills. So this kind of ties into time management because everyone studies differently, but I think the more hours you put into it, the more thoughtfully and productively you study, the better off you're going to be. So one way to study is to have multiple to-do lists. So you have a daily list, a weekly list, and a monthly list, and you look at tasks from the big picture perspective. So if you know you have a 45-page essay coming up, which sounds crazy, but I had to write one, so hopefully you guys don't. But when I had to write that paper, that was something that I knew, like, absolutely, there's no way I can wait till the night before to write that paper. I have to actually take a step back and plan this out. So when I was assigned that, I had thought about, like, what do I need to do? And how am I going to do this? So I broke it down. I said, I need to go to the library for at least 3 weeks and compile all of my research. And I'd put that all on a Google Doc, and then that's what I did for like 3 weeks, just all the research, all of the reading. And then after that, I would start outlining, and I did that for about a week. And then after that, the next, however many weeks you have, that's when you're actually writing, and then you want to always leave time for editing and getting feedback and maybe going to office hours and peer editing. So having some sort of calendar or timeline, I think, can be really helpful. I also see there's lots of different to-do list tricks, and even just doing a simple Google search on how to make a to-do list will show you so many different ideas that you might have never thought of before. So I like having an urgent and a not urgent list. Right now I'm using this app called Trello to get organized, and I have things that's like due tomorrow, due this week, in the future. And then I even have a list that's just like ideas where I put down things that I know I need to do, but I don't necessarily have time to do, but eventually I want to do those tasks. So you can have all sorts of different lists to really make yourself productive. I've heard of people doing to-do lists for 5-minute tasks, 20-minute tasks, hour-long tasks, big projects. And that's kind of helpful too, because then if you have a 5-minute pocket of time in between classes, you can just do one of your 5-minute tasks really quickly. And they don't all have to be big school things. It can be little things like, call grandma, and that can be a quick thing that you do just to check in and say hi, and it'll make you feel better. It's not necessarily schoolwork, but that is that break for self-care. Okay, so this is something that you can do if you have multiple tests or assignments due the same day. So when I say that, I immediately think of finals week. You might have a bunch of tests all on one day. Maybe it'll be spread out, but you never know. So things you can do if that's your situation are to set earlier deadlines for yourself. So instead of saying, I need to be ready for this final by December 15th, maybe tell yourself December 10th so that you can give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Study in order of your tests. That's helpful. If you have one test Monday and another test Friday, probably prioritize that Monday test so you have a few days in between. Always take breaks. And I think it's really important to try to keep to your normal schedule. So when I was in college, I did not do that at all. I would stay up all night long and study and work, and I would get really distracted because I definitely would see if all my friends were hanging out and studying together, I wanted to go too and do that. I didn't want to be left out. So I would just stay up all night with them. And one time we all went to Denny's, and it was totally unproductive for 3 hours, but I didn't want to miss out. So try to study alone and kind of disassociate yourself from that, because it might not be the most productive use of your time. It was fun, but realistically, I didn't need to do that, and I was really tired the next day for my final. So use your judgment, and it's okay to say no to people, and you'll see them again later. So always keep that in mind. If possible, ask for an extension or an alternate test day. But I'm not really a fan of that advice. I think it kind of, might send the wrong message to your teacher or your professor. It might show that you're kind of flaky or you don't know how to plan ahead. I've definitely have asked for an extension before when I had a family emergency. So I think you need to kind of ask for that in the right circumstances, because you don't want to be known as a student that's always doing that. So use your judgment. If it's a real true emergency and you really do need an extension, I think that's okay. But you don't want to ask for it just to ask for it. All right, and then just the obvious tips. Use your time wisely. So if you have a lunch break, use it to study, or, decide you're going to take your break and you're going to have that be your self-care time. That's okay too, right? So just kind of plan out how you want to use your day. And then the study sweet spot. This is something I'm sure you guys have all heard before, but it's important to find the best time of day for you to study. So maybe that's daytime, maybe it's nighttime. I don't know. You have to figure out what works for you. I think it's helpful to study in the same place every time, but also I was kind of opposite. I like to be in a different place because then it's less boring. I'm not a fan of studying. I'm sure most of you guys aren't either. So if I could find something to amuse myself by going to a different cafe or a different spot in the library, or even just a different floor in the library, I think that's helpful too, just to kind of spice it up a little bit. All right, so another thing that is so important is limiting distractions. So put your phone in another room, put it on Do Not Disturb, turn it off. I one time had to give in my dorm, we didn't have Wi-Fi, but we had an Ethernet cable that you had to plug into your computer. And I would get so distracted when I was on my computer. I needed my computer to type and to read my PDF articles. But if I had the internet, I would just immediately go on Facebook or, whatever website, and I would get so distracted. So I ended up giving my Ethernet cord to my floor mate down the hall, and I was like, please take this and don't give it back to me until my paper is done. So that's kind of helpful too. Use your friends to hold you accountable. If you can't do that, I know you guys don't have Ethernet cables anymore, but maybe get someone to change the Wi-Fi in your apartment. That might be helpful so that you can't connect. Anything that you can do to really just limit distractions. You can also use different apps where you can say, I'm going to work for 25 minutes and then break for 5 minutes, work for 25, break for 5. And there's apps that actually just, you press start and they do that. So you don't have to keep changing your alarms for that. So use your resources. There's lots of apps and little technological tricks you can take advantage of. All right, so this is another study tip, also a writing tip, is always go to office hours before you start working on something. So if you have a paper or a project assigned to you, go to office hours. Don't just go totally unprepared. Have some notes, have an outline, but go to your TA or your GSI and say hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does this make sense? Do you have any suggestions? And I think that shows a lot of initiative. A lot of students don't always do that, but if you do that, you'll show them that you're really prepared and you were really thinking ahead. and they'll give you some ideas of what they want to read or what they want to hear, and that's going to help you stand out later. All right, and then of course when you're studying, it's more than just reading your notes. For me, that doesn't work at all. I read my notes, or even if writing my notes isn't that helpful. Just doing that, I have to do more. So if I'm reading my notes, maybe I'll draw a picture, or I really like flashcards. That's helpful, and that works for me. It helps me memorize. And even just the act of like making the flashcards is helpful. I usually spend way more time writing the flashcards than I do actually reviewing them. And that works for me. So you have to figure out what works for you. Practice tests are helpful. Sample problems for math or for science class are really helpful too. And if you're doing like vocabulary, or if you're in a foreign language class, just really using that all the time and incorporating that into your daily life can be really helpful. I had a Spanish class once, and I had a test coming up, and I put Post-its all over like all my furniture in the house so that I would remember what everything was called, and that was helpful too. All right, so we have a school planner on the Hub that I'll show you guys really quickly. But while I do that, I just want to have a quick call for questions. If there are any, please type them in the Q&A box, and I'll answer them right after I show you the Hub. And then I'm also going to launch the final poll so we can wrap up. So this is just the same questions that we did earlier. So take a quick second to answer that, and then I will show you the planner. All right, so if you're on the Hub and you want to use the school planner, you can just go to the resource section right over here, resources, and type in planner. Oops. There it is. And it takes you to a Google Sheet that you can edit. And this is, again, like I said, everyone needs to find their method of doing this. So here's an option where you can just kind of input everything onto this Google Sheet. There's a daily schedule down at the bottom. So if you wanted to be like really nitty-gritty, you could do that. You could track your weekly assignments right here, semester assignments. This is definitely an option. I'm more of like a calendar person or a written to-do list. I have this is like my written to-do list right here. That's really helpful for me. I like the physical act of crossing things out. So it's really up to you to figure out what is going to work for you and how you can best manage your time and manage your tasks. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'll leave this up for a couple more seconds for anyone else to complete the poll. Again, in the future, these will be part of your credit, so keep that in mind. And if not, I just want to thank everybody. I hope you guys all have a good few days off from school, and we will see you on the Hub. Talk to y'all later.